Hey, Jim.
Oh, hi, Dave. Hello, Hopkinton. Welcome to the Hopkinton Hangout Hour for Monday. We're really glad that you could join us. For this hour, we'll be talking with the town engineer, Dave Del Torrio, and getting an update on Hopkinton's big dig down in the center of town. And in the second half hour, we'll be talking with Dr. Carol Kavanaugh and getting questions for the superintendent. So I'll invite you to stay tuned. In between those two segments, we'll sneak in Tom Nappy with an update on how the sports have been happening down on the weekend, Saturday and Sunday. And I look forward to next week. Before we get to all of that stuff, if episode isn't action-packed enough, I would like to share with you an email that I recently received. We do get comments from time to time. Oftentimes people will, tell us in passing that, oh, something nice about us. But this person went the next step and sent us an email that really meant a lot to me, and I'd like to share it with you. The segment with Dr. Kavanaugh and Sean McCullough from yesterday's Hangout Hour was very informative and timely. Your station is doing an excellent job of putting out relevant and useful programming. I prefer to watch HCAM rather than read social media, which often has misinformation and biased content. I'll definitely be watching the HCAM news and school committee meeting later this evening. Thank you, Adrian Pletcher. In fact, Adrian, thank you very much. And in fact, I was so moved by that I would like you to have one of our HCAM water bottles. So I'm putting one aside for you, and I will be in touch about getting it to you. Anybody else, if you would like to send us an email and let us know what you're thinking about your TV station, we would definitely love to hear all of your comments and suggestions. So with all of that, right now, Dave, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for taking the time with us.
Sure, no problem. My pleasure, Jim.
All right. And I got it right? You're the town engineer?
I am the town engineer here in Hopkinton, among a couple other things, but for this segment, I'm the town engineer.
So that means you're like Scotty, right? Because Scotty was the chief engineer on the Enterprise. So you're...
Yes, I'll take that as a compliment. I will.
Yeah. Oh, it certainly is. You know, Scotty's known as a miracle worker, so it definitely is a compliment. Now, to get started, in case there's anyone in town who hasn't heard about the project, I would like you to, if you wouldn't mind, just give us a brief overview of what is going on in our downtown.
So the Main Street Corridor project, as some may know, some may not, it's been going on for before I was here, which is about a little over 10 and a half years ago. So the project really was initiated probably even 20 years ago. But it's finally got to a point where we are going to start construction on this project, which is the limits of Main Street, 300 feet west of Wood Street, all the way through the downtown corridor, past the start of the Boston Marathon, to 300-400 feet east of Ash Street. Project really was quite expansive from a width standpoint. The town's really, fit in new sidewalks all the way from Wood Street to Ash Street on both sides of the road. Currently, we don't have sidewalks on some portions of Main Street. We've also included a two-way bike lane on the south side of the street from where the center trail exits on Main Street, which is, if nobody knows or if somebody doesn't know, it's just opposite of Hopkinton Lumber. And that two-way bike lane will go all the way to Hayden Row. We are undergrounding utilities, which is a massive undertaking. Those utilities, what that really means is the telephone poles that we have out there right now between just about the police station, just west of the police station to Ash Street will be removed. And all the power lines and communication lines, town fiber, everything that's a wire overhead is going underground. We will be putting in new ornamental street lighting on the north side of Main Street from about the police station to Cedar Street. Then we kind of switch them over to the south side of the street from about Church Street to Cedar Street, and then they kind of swap back over from Hayden Road to Ash Street. And that's just from a lighting standpoint, they worked out the best. We also have some ornamental pedestrian lighting that we're going to include on Marathon Ave, which is a good segment into, Marathon Ave right now is a two-way street. That's going to be turned into a one-way going east. We're expanding the Doughboy Island a little bit to include some additional greenway space. New street lights and signaling equipment at Wood Street, at Cedar Street, and we're going to be adding flash and beacons for pedestrian crossings at Pleasant Street. At the fire station and police station, we're including a public safety an overhead light, so when the fire or police get a call, they'll actually be able to generate a red light and stop traffic in front of those public safety facilities, where sometimes right now when it's, high traffic times, they might not be able to get out. So, and then we also have another flashing beacon at Church Street, and then we're going to have an overhead flashing yellow at Hayden Row. So some considerable amount of traffic lighting improvements. There'll be all new signs. We're going to meet all the new federal highway requirements. And we got so there'll be some signage improvements, and there'll be some additional signage that people notice. So on the surface, that's a lot of work going on, and it's pretty much from right away to right away.
Now, so did you say it's a 2-lane bike lane?
Correct. It's a shared use path, more or less. It's at a minimum, it's 8 foot width, and it is a 2-directional. So it's north and, or not north and south, east and west. But in addition to that, we're also going to have a sidewalk on the same side of the road that's separate from the bike path. So from if you're from the profile, if you were to call it from the center of the road, you're going to have your travel lane for your car going east. Then you'll have parking if there's parking on that side. Then you'll have the bike lane, and then you'll have the sidewalk. And there's a physical separation between all three of those things. The bike lane and the sidewalk is more or less a curb reveal. So they are separated, and there's a little bit of a grade difference between the two. And then the separation between the parking spaces and the bike lanes, that varies through the project, but it'll be a minimum of 2 feet. And there's some areas that they're a lot wider than 2 foot. And that would be stamped concrete, or even some of the larger areas will probably be a green space.
I see. I cannot believe how long this project has taken from somebody first coming up with the idea until today, where it's actually happening. Yeah,
it's a long process, particularly in this case when there's this type of funding involved. The funding comes from it's the Metropolitan Planning, it's the MPO. They control what's called TIP funding. It's the Transportation Improvement Program through the state. The MPO gets all the federal funds for the area that we're in, which is the MPO. Other areas of the state have similar programs. They just it's for those different towns.
Right.
We're in the Boston area region, so
right. So once they're providing funding, I'm sure that they get a seat at the table to talk about what the final design looks like too.
Yeah, it's a MassDOT, it's a Department of Transportation review process. There's very specific design requirements and design process. There's actually 4 separate design submissions that are made for the project. In addition to that, with the federal requirements, the right-of-way process for a project funded through the TIP is a monumental task, especially with the undergrounding and especially with the increasing the use of the right-of-way to include everything. So yeah, it's literally what my first year here, we hired a consultant to start the design. So it's been 10 and a half years. It'll be 11 years before construction starts. And I've been
That-
told that we're lucky from some of the
Yeah.
other, the design consultants say some of these projects take, 20 years to actually hit the
Yeah.
ground. So
Wow.
it's an opportunity for towns to get a large amount of money for the project. For us, we were awarded $11.8 million for the project. So
Yep. All right. So as everyone else has seen, there's stuff going on in the streets now. They're digging holes, they're making trenches. Can you give us an update on like what's happening now and what's going on there?
yeah, the part of the requirement to receive the TIP funding is that all other utility work that needs to be done from like an infrastructure standpoint, if you have old pipes or mains, or if you want to upgrade something, all that work's got to get done before the master contractor comes in to do this work. What's going on out right now is an Eversource gas project. They're more or less upgrading, or they put in last year they put in a larger gas main. They put in an 8-inch gas main, where there's an existing 4-inch main out there now. The work out there right now is more or less they're connecting houses and business services from the old main to the new, and reconnecting to the houses. So they're kind of jumping around all over the place, because you got to coordinate with, when you're doing the work for the services, you got to coordinate with the property owner.
Mm-hmm.
So I know Eversource is doing their best to do that. There was some water work that was done to upgrade some of the mains earlier this year, as well as previous years. So all that other utility work needs to be finished beforehand.
Right. I do remember when they were putting in some new water stuff down that street. I don't know if you know off the top of your head, is this the only utility work left remaining to be brought up to spec? Is the gas line? Is everything else kind of
Yes.
recent enough that it's good to go?
Everything else has been upgraded, and that needs to be upgraded for the MassDOT project.
Okay. I know sometimes Eric has talked about finding some unusual things underground, such as water mains made out of wood. And he always like shows pictures of that. That stuff is interesting. Do you happen to know if they came across anything unusual or unexpected while they were digging holes down the street?
For the gas main project, I don't believe they found anything. Typically, they're a shallower kind of infrastructure, so they typically don't need to go more than 3, 4, 5 feet below grade for gas. Some of the water stuff, especially downtown, they can go pretty deep, but nothing interesting like the old hollowed out, logs for water pipes, something like that.
Right. I was going to ask the next question, but I think you've kind of touched upon it. If there were any other departments in our town that are involved in coordinating with what's happening, but it sounds like a lot of other stuff is kind of recent and up to spec. I don't know if any other departments are coordinating with you.
Yeah, throughout the design, there's probably not a department that hasn't, other than maybe the senior center and library. So I know public safety's been involved throughout for sure. We are providing some upgrades to their service as part of this project through coordination with IT, our IT department, because our town fiber is going underground throughout this area. So we're taking the opportunity to upgrade the town IT infrastructure as well. Our IT director, you could get him in here and give everybody an update on that. But right now hopefully when the project's done, the use of town hall might not be needed anymore as a component of our town fiber, which is good because police is, it'll all be at the police station, which is much more of a, a safer place for it to be.
Right. Yeah.
Other departments, other boards and committees, building department, we coordinated with when we did inspections of all the properties, certainly our finance department and all these, you know, grants and
Yeah.
funding and all the different host community agreements and certainly, town manager's office for everything else. So there really hasn't been, if I left any department out, I didn't mean to, but of
Right.
course, highway, water and sewer, they've always been involved.
Right. So right now, Dave, there are short detours and lane closings. As we now know, it's the gas line that's kind of moving down the street and making connections and kind of upgrading their things like that. I'm just wondering if what is it going to go quiet over the winter, and when is the big stuff going to start happening?
Yeah, like most construction activities, they'll end sometime in November. There's usually a winter moratorium, when the asphalt plants start closing. I, I believe it's November 11th, I think is when all activities are supposed to stop unless the DPW director can, authorize extensions depending on the weather. But overall, I know the gas main project will follow that, process as well as the Main Street project when that starts. There'll be no activities over, December through March. Well, things will start back up in April.
Mm.
And there'll be, for the Main Street corridor project, we are, it's doing full depth reconstruction for the entire road. Well, that means they're actually, they're gonna go down 2.5 feet through the entire cross section of the road to dig up all the old gravel. They're gonna be putting in new pavement. So it's also widening of the infrastructure to include the sidewalks and the bike path. So there will be lane narrowings. There'll be one-way traffic. We'll utilize detours of Main Street, in coordination with public safety and DPW and town manager's office to, best way to deal with certain activities that come up. And we'll certainly coordinate with MassDOT and their contractor. We do have a unique opportunity to detour some around the areas, but again, the town's sensitive to, those neighborhoods that are behind town Main Street that they do run parallel, and it makes it attractive to want to just put everything right down there. But as well as the businesses in town, we certainly want to keep traffic open. And it will be a MassDOT project. So MassDOT really is the driver and the owner of the project. They have much more significant traffic management policies than Eversource Gas has to follow. There'll be signage, beyond the limits of this project. You'd be surprised if you might see signs up on 495 sometimes to avoid traffic through the downtown area. The MassDOT contractors will be using the barrels, reflectorized barrels and cones. It'll be managed much more stringently. Stringently might not be the more, but there'll be more resources put into traffic management because MassDOT understands and they have the experience,
Right.
these types of projects.
You might not think this is super impressive because this is what you do, but when I imagine them taking out the road and replacing it, I don't imagine them digging down 2.5 feet. That is a lot. That is a lot for the road. That's amazing. And I
Yeah,
think you mentioned that Eversource is somewhere between 3 and 4 feet deep.
yeah, right now for their gas project, yeah, their gas main is maybe 3.5, 4 feet deep, and the services they like to put in are typically about 2.5 feet down.
Hmm.
But for the project here where we're undergrounding, we're putting in, 3 underground concrete duct banks. Um, that's probably close to an 8 or 9 foot span where we're going to be putting concrete duct banks right
Yeah.
below 2.5 feet. And under that, we have the new drainage system that we're going to be putting in because all the drainage structures and drainage catch basins, and as part of this project, we did a complete drainage study for the sub basin that drains down to Main Street.
Hmm.
All the drainage that in the future could come down Church Street and Hayden Row, and that comes down Grove Street. Um, the drainage system in Main Street's being sized for that possible future condition, which is again another requirement of the MassDOT process. It's just all inclusive, so
Right.
it's considerable. And then again, we're going to have to do electricity for the street lights, electricity for the pedestrian lights, everything that's going underground. Um, the coordination with the property owners to underground all their utilities into their homes.
Hmm.
Quite a, it's been quite a process.
Right. Do you know off the top of your head, how deep do utilities go under a street?
Typically, like your electric and your Verizon and your Comcast and all those kind of telecommunications are pretty shallow, and even your gas services probably no more than 3 feet, 3.5.
Okay.
And then you try to squeeze your your drainage into that, like your catch basin structures, and then you follow with water, which is 5 to 6 feet deep, and then your seven to sewer goes 7 to sometimes 20 something feet. So
Wow.
you kind of try to build a profile of that future condition as we're doing all these utilities now, so that they don't impact when Mass DOT's contractors coming in to put in all these new underground conduits and drainage structures. And so there is
Right.
the last piece of that puzzle is this gas project, which is, gas historically will conflict with underground concrete conduit. So it's been a challenge.
Yeah.
We're working through it as that project's progressing now. So
Right. And last question, as our
sure.
second comes to an end, how do they stratify? Are there templates for how different utilities are located underground? Like, do you separate electric from gas and how far? And does it go by depth or does it go by location on the road? How do you keep track of that?
Yeah, a lot of it's but well, for the water stuff, it needs to be so many feet deep so it don't freeze. Where you don't have that issue with electric and gas. So I just think from maybe a historical standpoint, these are where these utilities fit best. And sewers, they always have to design gravity sewers. So you try to chase something and keep it going to gravity, especially in New England with all the rolling hills and everything. Those end up going deep. So you put a pump station 100 feet. I
Yeah.
just think it might have been just kind of where these things ended up. Your drainage structures again is gravity fed, so those ended up starting 3, 4 feet deep. So
I see.
maybe when electricity and all the Verizon and Comcast came into the game, they didn't have anywhere else to go but shallow. So
Okay. Now, last question. Now, Dave, I'm not asking you
yeah,
what the date is. Okay. I know Mass Dot is like really driving a lot of this.
yes.
If everything goes according to plan, what's their expectation for when this project might be wrapped up?
The When we get a final schedule from the contractor, we're gonna post it, but what we're going with is it's a full 2-year construction project. So next summer, 2021 and the summer of 2022, Hopkinton can expect there's going to be work out on Main Street and not small amounts of work. It'll be large amounts of work digging up all sorts of things. The third year, 2023 should be a punch list. Maybe the first part of the construction year, they're doing some of the last pavement or something along those lines, because they want to, you would want to come through last and do all your roadway pavement. So, that's what I would expect. 2023 is when it's gonna end. There'll be this and that going on, and there'll be the warranty period for a lot of stuff. So they may come back, for landscaping stuff. If some of
Yeah.
the trees and bushes planted didn't take, they may have to redo some of that stuff.
Right.
Faulty structure here or there, they may have to come in and replace a street light fixture or something like that. But it'll be nothing like the first 2 years. That's what I'm
Okay.
hoping.
Aren't we all?
Yeah, I think so. I think we are.
So listen, you have a fascinating job, and your job is really, working on the town, which we're all a part of. So it's very interesting. I really value the time that you spent just kind of giving us some insight. And at some point in the future, maybe just before things get going, it would be really interesting to kind of have a walkthrough on the timeline of like what kind of work are they going to be starting, where is it going to go, and what, so as we see stuff, we'll have a little bit of understanding of what it is we're actually looking at. But thank you so much for coming on today.
No problem, Jim. Anytime you can ask and I'll.
Thank you, sir. Thanks very much. All right. Take care.
All right, Jim. Thank you.
All right. So that was really interesting. Learning about what's going to be happening in our community. And I hope that when he comes back on, we'll talk more about like final views and stuff like that. But right now it's time to talk sports with our news director, who also is a sports director at heart. So Tom, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, no problem. So we just got through an exciting weekend of sports. And we had numerous.
Yes. So just in case somebody hasn't heard, give us the overview.
Absolutely. All right. So, of course, a lot of the sports, most of them are taking place on weekend days, Saturdays and Sundays. And we've had all the JV and varsity action for you live every weekend, which we will continue to do throughout this fall sports one season. So why don't we take a look at what happened this past weekend real quickly. On Saturday, the 17th, we had cross country as well as some boys soccer. In the boys cross country meet, Hopkinton got the 22-33 win. And then in the girls cross country meet, it was a 32-23 loss for Hopkinton, but a very close contest. And then in JV boys soccer, Holliston took the win 3-1. And then a very exciting boys soccer matchup. Both teams scored a goal in the final 10 minutes of the game. Captain Owen Schnur scored the lone Hillers goal in the 1-1 tie. And the boys also celebrated their two seniors, Ross Komkowicz and Patrick Krantz. And we do have a bunch of photos courtesy of John Ritz over at our sceneinhopkinton.org. So be sure to head over there to check out some great photos of the boys soccer senior night. And then on Sunday, October 18th, JV girls soccer got the win over Holliston 2-1. And varsity girls soccer, they fell in a very well fought out game to Holliston, 1-0. And then we had varsity field hockey, a tough 3-1 loss, but a very good game nonetheless. And then in JV field hockey, Holliston got the 1-0 win. As far as sports coming up next week, it all starts off on Saturday, October 24th. We have boys cross country at 10 a.m., followed by girls cross country at 11 a.m. And then at 12:30, we'll have boys varsity soccer. At 2:30 p.m., boys JV soccer. And then on Sunday, October 25th, Hiller sports continue at noon with JV girls soccer, followed by varsity girls soccer at 2 p.m. And of course, you can catch all those games live airing on HCAM Ed, as well as our YouTube channel, youtube.com/HCAMTV.
That's awesome. Thank you, Tom. And I have heard from the athletic director, Rich Cormier, as well as some coaches, as well as some parents who've been looking for the games, how well appreciated HCAM is for doing this, because a lot of people cannot attend the games now. So we're still bringing it to them live. So that's exciting work. And thank you for doing that.
Absolutely. We have a lot of fun doing it.
Great. All right. Talk to you soon.
All right.
And
Take care.
all right, we're just minutes away from Dr. Kavanaugh, but just before she comes on, we're gonna introduce Matt, our master control operator. Just give us a quick preview of some of the other programming that we'll be seeing this week. So Matt, welcome.
Thanks, Jim. And I'll try to make this quick because I'm sure people are looking forward to talking with the superintendent. Well, coming up later tonight, we obviously have the planning board meeting at 7 p.m. Tomorrow, we don't have a normal live scheduled program on Tuesdays, but we do have a binge block at 3 p.m. on HCAM Ed. We're going to be looking at some of the 2018 football games from that year. At 6 p.m., we do have the select board meeting airing on HCAM TV as well as on YouTube and Facebook, as well as the Conservation Commission meeting at 6:30 on YouTube. On Wednesday, we have HCAM Sports Talk with Tom Nappy at 3 p.m. on HCAM TV, followed by the Hopkinton Hangout Hour hosted by, I believe, Mike is on this week at 7. On Thursday, we have another binge block at 3 p.m. We're going to be looking at some ice hockey games from the 2018-2019 season. Then Tom will be back with the HCAM News Live at 6:30 p.m., followed by Terry Malisi at 7 p.m. with The Gathering in Quarantine. And then, of course, Amy Beck will be bringing us to Keep Moving with the Senior Center on Friday at 10 a.m. Sorry.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that, Matt. And if you're like me and thinking, ooh, that's a lot of stuff, what was all that? I encourage you to visit our website, hcam.tv, click on the button that says newsletters, and you can sign up for the digital version of what Matt just said, called the HCAM Insider. Every week, it's an email that tells you everything that's new that week. And now we are happy to turn to our conversation, Ask the Superintendent, with Dr. Carol Kavanaugh, who is our superintendent. Carol, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jim. As always, I'm very happy to be here.
Oh, I'm glad, because we love chatting with you, and so does our community. So I know what I'm seeing in the high school, and I am seeing kids coming in every other day, and I'm seeing learning going on as learning has been going on. And I'm interested to know kind of the overview that you've been seeing of the students in our schools.
Sure. So I have been, in all 5 schools, and, you get to see what teaching and learning looks like. And I don't really know that it's all that different from what it used to look like, except for, I think the stark contrast might be the 6 feet of separation. In my last superintendent report, I did, show some of the pictures I had taken at the middle school, and PE wellness looked like PE wellness does outside with some running. And we had 2 kids seated in the hallway at the middle school, and they both had laptops and they both had masks on, but one was up against one wall and one was on the other wall, and there were 6 feet between them. And then I walked into a classroom where kids were taking a math test, and despite the fact that the desks were 6 feet apart from one another, the teaching and learning looked pretty normal, I would say. People have asked about the transmission of the virus, and I love giving this report, and I knock on wood every single time that I do. But we have had 6 positive people in the Hopkinton Public Schools, and thankfully, there has been, despite the fact that people have entered our schools COVID positive, there has been no transmission within our walls. So, a student might get it from a parent, or a student might get it from a team, that is not a Hopkinton Public Schools team. But when, they come back into our building, I think just the social distancing, the hand washing, the wearing of masks, and just our general caution in our best practices have kept us from transmitting the virus within our walls. So we're very pleased about that to date.
Right. Now, so there have been 6 cases so far in Hopkinton. Have
Yeah.
there been any cases in staff or administration?
So when I say 6 cases in the Hopkinton Public Schools, we're really not able to identify whether that's students or staff or administrators or whatever. So I can just tell you that there have been 6 overall.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. I do know talking about getting started again, we had our first episode of HHS today, and the question of the day is, what has been the best thing about the start of the school year? And overwhelmingly, the answer was the same, and that was seeing my friends again. So in my school, I have seen students happy to be there, students happy to, be able to say hello to their friends and get down to business.
Mhm. Yes. And as I ask kids the same thing, especially the high school age kids, they will say that they are just so thrilled to be back, within the walls of the high school.
Right. So it's almost November. Maybe we're a month in. Yeah, we're roughly about a month in since we first started.
Mhm.
Have you had to adjust anything that we do? I mean, how could you adjust the fogging? I mean, you fog every building 5 days a week. Has there been any part of the plan that, as you're observing a month of activity, that you've adjusted or tweaked?
So none of the cleaning protocols, there have been a couple of, just those kind of building practices. So for example, in the beginning, we were keeping the middle school doors closed until 7:15. And then we realized that was untenable because the traffic every day was at CVS. So it was not good for our schools, and it was certainly not good for our community to have that bottleneck every day. But I guess the first challenge that we've seen is what happens when you have your first positive student, for example, a first positive faculty or staff. So what has happened to us is, either a parent will call and say, I'm having my child tested because I think my child may be COVID positive, or the Department of Public Health will call us and say, we understand that a student is being tested and we'll be able to let you know when the report comes back to us. And then once we have an identified person within the schools who is in fact COVID positive, then we start to do the contact tracing. And in the beginning, I think we were a little bit slow with that because we were trying to determine who is a close contact, who isn't. We're looking at class lists and all that kind of stuff, seating arrangements. But now I think we've kind of got it down pat, and we've got a set of letters that go out to people who are close contacts or siblings of close contacts. I think the one thing that as a district we're still working on is ensuring learning for those students who are identified as close contacts or siblings of close contacts. That's been a little bit challenging for us. And so that, we're working on it. Thankfully, right now, the numbers have been very low. But, there are those students who have had to be quarantined and they're not positive. They're just close contacts of people who have been positive. And so they're, out of school for, however many days it takes to reach 14 after the exposure. So if you were exposed on Thursday and we learn about it on Sunday, those days are already accounted for when we get to Monday. But if you were exposed on Saturday and we learn about it on Sunday, then you start counting on that Sunday. So those were a lot of days, technically. Mm-hmm.
Right. Now, when you talk about contact tracing, I know that in the past we have talked about a standard of closer than 6 feet for more than 15 minutes. Is that something that's a thing?
That is exactly what we're talking about. Yeah. Closer than 6 feet for more than 15 minutes. And what we've also learned is that health departments across the state now are really looking at cumulative time. So for example, if you and I were in a classroom for 45 minutes and you were positive and I subsequently learned that you were, we may have had a conversation where we were 6 feet apart for 5 minutes, and then another one before the end of the period where we were again 6 feet apart for another 10 minutes. They're looking at that time, the 5 minutes and the 10 minutes, as cumulative time now. So it does make it a little bit more tricky.
So that's so interesting because in the class, all the desks are 6 feet apart.
Yes.
So if someone were doing contact tracing from a person, then you would have to talk to the teacher in the class and kind of say, like, during this period,
Mhm.
where did that person go and how close were they to you or somebody else? Is that how it goes? I've never had it
Yeah.
before.
So if if you took, say, a middle school classroom where kids are in there for, say, 40 minutes, and if I were the COVID positive person, we would look at my north, south, east, and west peers. So if I have a person who sits in front of me, behind me, to the left, or to the right of me,
Mhm.
those students would be considered my close contacts. So people will say, well, wait a minute, aren't the desks in that classroom 6.5 feet? And the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and the health departments in Massachusetts really don't want to kind of quibble over, is it 6 feet, 6 feet 1 inch, 6 feet? So they really are looking at your north, south, east, and west peers. That's how they're taking it. Occasionally we will have a place where someone is doing a lab, for example, and even though the kids are 6 feet apart, if you're moving from station to station, conceivably you could be within 6 feet of like almost anyone in your 7-person lab setting at the high school, for example, for more than 15 minutes. So in that case, we might just say everyone in that setting was considered a close contact, because it's hard to gauge the 15 minutes really.
I see.
Mhm.
Who's doing all this work? Who's doing
Oh.
who's doing the contact tracing?
Well, I can tell you that once we are alerted from the DPH or from a parent, typically the nurse is the person who will get things going. The nurse will say to the building principal, I need, the seating charts. And so we start to look at the seating charts. Right now, seating charts should be uploaded in Power School for every classroom every day. So the nurse can typically pull them. And then the nurse, the building principal, I as superintendent, and the public health official we'll go through a very long list, and we ensure that we know who is and who isn't a close contact. And once we establish that, we have email addresses and phone numbers for all of those families. And then we say, do all of those children have siblings, or do they not have siblings in the Hopkinton Public Schools? And if so, we reach out to, so say Mr. Keller had a COVID positive person and a close contact in his building. If that close contact had a sibling at Elmwood and at Marathon, we would reach out to Mrs. Carver and Mrs. DeBow to let them know that they would also be having a sibling of a close contact quarantining in those buildings.
I see.
Yes.
Does it go back for, like, if a test comes back positive, how far back do you know to look?
So a close contact still needs to quarantine for the 14 days.
Mhm.
So even if I'm a close contact and I go and I have the PCR test and it comes back negative, I still have to stay out for my entire 14-day quarantine period. But my younger brother or sister, as a sibling of a close contact, as soon as I test negative and I have no symptoms, as long as my brother or sister in my household is able to be isolated from me, meaning I have my own space where I eat meals, I have my own personal bathroom to use, then my sibling could go back to school. So there's more flexibility with the sibling of a close contact than with the close contact himself or herself or their self.
Okay. And how is the delay working on getting test results back? You know how long they're taking?
I think what we've typically found is that it can vary a little bit from test site to test site, but in the several cases that we've had, I am so grateful to our local public health officials, Casey Morrow and Sean McAuliffe. Those results have been coming back sort of lickety split quick, in some cases, like no more than 48 hours. So that has been super helpful to, assuage a lot of the fears that we have had.
Right. And is that the way it goes with the testing, or could a parent say, we went to our pediatrician and they had a test there?
No, there are some folks who can go to their pediatrician, and some pediatrician offices are now testing sites as well. And so, you can have a test done there, and then, again, the results come back pretty quickly. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Very lucky. Yes.
Now, I expect you have seen the news in like the past week or so, worrying that the winter might be difficult. And I am sure that you think about that and you watch that happening. Are you evaluating everything that we do for policies and procedures here in Hopkinton? Or have you reached a point where there is nothing else we can do? We're doing the best we can.
Well, I think as a school district, we have everything in place that I think we need to have in place right now. But I am certainly aware that Hopkinton as a community had been in that unshaded category for weeks and weeks, and we just, kind of slipped into the green. So that was something to be, I guess, alert to. We also try to, and I know I've said this before, really look to see where those cases are. If you get a family of 5 that has traveled and they return to Hopkinton and they have contracted COVID wherever they were, so 5 new cases are all in the same household isolated, that doesn't really pose a risk or a threat to our public schools.
Right.
You look at some of those communities where where there's a jail, for example, obviously not Hopkinton, but those are the kinds of places where numbers might be very high in the state of Massachusetts, and yet that's not something that would influence their public schools. But that said, we're watching, and we also have some concerns about upcoming holidays. So people will be traveling probably for Thanksgiving, and they may go out of state and they may come back and need to quarantine. And it's hard to know how that will impact our enrollment, our attendance, I should say.
Yes, yeah, I agree. Unless, of course, they listen to Dr. Fauci, was just, I heard today, is not having his children travel to him for the holidays because they're thinking of health.
Yes. Yeah. Given the fact that I did hear Dr. Fauci this morning say that with numbers on the rise, if you are planning to travel to extended family, you really are increasing the possibility of the spread of COVID, markedly, and not just in Massachusetts, but, clearly like nationally.
Right.
Yes. So we will watch those things. I know there are other districts that are doing, sort of a mandatory 2-week quarantine after Thanksgiving or after the December, holiday break. And, I'm sort of interested to see what it looks like before we make that decision. But that kind of a decision could be made. I mean, at any point we could say that, maybe a portion of our kids need to be remote, like, would we ever need to say that the high school might need to go remote, or we may need to, bring in just our intensive special needs students and let other students be remote, so it would really be about learning needs and the presence of the coronavirus and, the building location and all of that. So there are so many factors to consider.
Well, there you go. You just did answer the question. It's not done, right? You have all kind of things that you're still considering, and there are levels and other procedures that you could be instituting based upon what you're observing in the community.
Sure.
Yeah. So we have a few minutes left, and you know what? I'd like to try something different. I'd like to try to talk about something that's not coronavirus. So I'd like to get kind of an update from you on what's happening with the school committee. I know that they're always often, they're reviewing policies and they're doing work, and what's up with them today?
Well, so I can give you a very quick, today was our very first budget meeting. And so what typically happens with the budget, so we're just, today is step 1 in budget season. But what will happen is each one of the building principals and every one of the directors will come forward and explain, what they are looking for the coming year in terms of budget. So for example, today's first budget meeting was with Mr. Ghosh, who is our Director of Technology and Innovative Learning. And so, we looked at what his budget asks are, and we'll be doing that now through December 17th, which is when we'll actually present that budget. But for folks who are watching school committee meetings, they can expect to be seeing, budget updates, kind of coming in, little by little, so that they get to see the principals present and the directors present and the assistant superintendent present. So there's an awful lot going on with budget. And yes, we are also doing a lot of policy work. there is maybe people don't know this, the things that the school committee are actually responsible for are budget, policy, and the evaluation of the superintendent. So that's really what our meetings have been focused on, looking at my goals as superintendent and the rubric indicators, as well as launching budget season and also policy. So what our policy subcommittee does is we call ourselves a working group. We take a look at policies, we review them periodically, and we put them out to the community so that they can see the kinds of policies that we have. Most recently, we are, and this won't be a surprise to anyone, looking at a policy on like teleeducation, for example, because that has been one of the things that has kind of come to us as a result of we've done things with mask wearing, but we're also looking at tutoring and functions of the school committee. Policies can be a little bit exciting. I know it might not be to the community, but for us, we enjoy reviewing it.
Now, so that actually makes me want to ask, because it's interesting. I know that teleeducation is a topic here in town. So the school committee has a role to play in developing policy. Do you ever remember that Schoolhouse Rock when they talk about how a bill becomes a law and they go through all the steps? So how do the steps work? Does it start at the school committee? Does a proposal come from you? And how does it all work?
So it could come from any source, really. So the school committee could say, we feel like we need a policy on teleeducation. I could say to them, I feel like we need a policy on or someone in the community could say, I feel like the school committee should have a policy on teleeducation. So anyone can initiate that. Typically, the policies are either initially reviewed or written by the policy working group, and then we put it out in the school committee packet so that anyone in town can see it. And then the school committee will give it a read and talk about it, because we're not violating open meeting laws, so we can't do that independently. Like I can't, the chair can't call another member and have that conversation privately. So what needs to happen is that we have that, at our meetings, openly, in an open meeting. And people will occasionally make comments on those policies. Someone will question a word like, what do you mean by citizenry here? Or what do you mean by the term teleconference? And, it does get us thinking about the definitions of the terms in our policies. So we typically bring them back for multiple readings. Even if we have a policy where we say, here's the first reading, and the school committee says, oh, I could live with that. And people in town don't say anything. We say, well, let's bring it back for one more reading because we want to make sure that we've given people ample time to take a look at them. There might be some policies that you just keep hammering away on, and we could have 3, 4, 5, 6 readings before we're happy with it,
And after the school committee and the superintendent like it, then where does it go from there? Is it instituted, or how does that work?
It's typically voted upon by the school committee after, we have acknowledged that we like it quite well and that we haven't heard from community voices who want to, ask a question, offer a suggestion, make a commendation, any of those kinds of things. So once we feel like, the airwaves are quieted and everybody is pretty happy with them, we well, not I, but the 5 school committee members will vote on those policies because technically they're their policies.
Okay. And is a reading? Do you read the policy out loud, or do you say we're having a space where everybody has read it and we're taking comments?
The latter. So we assume that everyone has read through the packet prior to coming to the meeting, that we're all familiar with the policy, and hopefully, while people are sitting at home, pen in hand, they've made some notes for themselves so that when we dialogue in public at an open meeting, we're all prepared to do that. So we call it a reading, but there's not really a recitation of the policy. It's just a discussion about it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'm not going to ask you to talk out of school, no pun intended, if that's what this would be, but I'm just interested in your experience. Do you, and maybe what this policy started, do you see a role for some manner of teleeducation in the future going forward?
I do. I think it's really important that we have that policy. Even if we said next week we're bringing all the students back in person into the Hopkinton Public Schools, what I think the pandemic has taught us is that there really is a fabulous role for, you know, the use of Zoom and other teleconferencing kinds of things. So, a coach could reach out and have a team meeting at 7 o'clock at night without bringing all the kids to the high school, for example. Or, if a guidance counselor wanted to have a meeting with a parent and a student about college admissions, there's a beautiful use for teleconferencing that we would not have ever thought of before that. Or, even if a teacher said, I know we're having that great big test tomorrow, and usually I meet with kids from 2 to 2:45, but I'm going to have one more open session at 7 o'clock tonight. If you feel like logging in, log in, and we can, answer some questions about this particular course and that particular test. So there are lots of reasons why, ways that we could in fact be using this. And even when we think about reaching out to kids who, there is in Mass General Law something called home or hospitalization tutoring. So before, what we would have to do is we would have to find a tutor to get all of that information to a student. It's hard to wonder if, in the new world, could we be able to have that student be kind of part remotely of a class that's happening in real time at any one of our schools. So.
All right. Well, you haven't addressed the big question yet, and that is snow days. So I know that, oh, you know what? Maybe we don't have to have snow days because we could just have school at home that day. And I'm curious, have you been hearing both sides? Because actually my wife and I are on different sides of this. My wife has always been like, snow days are just an unexpected pleasure, and they're just a joy, and they're like a treasure. And I always said, I'd rather have a snow day in July than have one in February. So we're kind of on different sides of the fence there. And I'm wondering what kind of feedback you're hearing.
Well, I guess personally and on a philosophical level, I think I would side with your wife. I think there's something just lovely about waking up and realizing the world has stopped for you. For 24 hours, you can just take that time to rest, rejuvenate, bake cookies, do whatever it is that you want to do in your household with your family. It's such a lovely, lovely, quiet time. And I think for people's mental health, it's just so good. But what will happen this year is the commissioner has asked that we have our snow days taught remotely. So the only way that we would have a real snow day this year, where we had to make it up in June, would be if there was a power outage in the town so widespread that we wouldn't be able to have kids accessing their technology. So we would have to say, oops, I guess, it's going to actually be a snow day, and we'd make it up in June.
Well, can I just say that is a very impressive statement, because I know that one of your least enjoyed activities is deciding when to call a snow day. And for you to value that, even though it's a torturous decision for you, I applaud you for that.
Yes, you can't make anyone happy on a snow day. Well, maybe you make 50% of the people happy, right? Yeah.
Right, exactly. Well, Carol, our time has gone away. Thank you so much for spending it with us and answering these questions and giving us an insight into what's happening with you.
Thank you. I always love being here, Jim. My pleasure.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. You have a great rest of your day.
You too.
And thank you so much for spending this hour with us on the Hangout Hour. We invite you back on Wednesday for our next live hour, and also repeats of other episodes throughout the week. And if you have anything to tell us, please do not hesitate to get in touch and let us know your thoughts, because we are your television station. Take care, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.